I'm Matt Koback, and this is a brief story of the Nootka people, the original whalers, built off of one of the only surviving primary sources of a 20-year-old Hull City Englander, John James Jewett. Although encouraged to be a surgeon, John Jewett sought a more adventurous career and found work on a frigate traveling towards the northwest coast of North America. After the month voyage and finally reaching the coast, the crew of the Boston were warmly greeted by local Nookans and leader McQuina. They exchanged gifts and appreciatively went their own ways after a dinner held by the leader of the Boston. Yet McQuina, the Nookan leader, felt disrespected by a faulty weapon that the Boston had given him. Returning the next day, McQuina and the Nookan people killed the sailors of the Boston, yet spared Jewett's life, as he was not only young, but a proficient mechanic. Jewett became a slave of the Nookan people, and religiously kept a diary that provided us an unbiased and impressionable insight to the natural way of life of the Nookan coast.
Okay, the word Nootka has become a misconception relating a person to a people. Taking out the N does not accomplish a group title, but misrepresents a people. The word does not even come up in their native tongue, but the explorer Cook seems to have been blamed for this pronunciation acceptance when he first encountered the group in the 18th century. The Nookan tribes do not even have a name for themselves in their own language, but rather a word meaning a similar people who we can understand. Now, the Nookan people have three dialects, much like Drucker discussed accents among different tribes. You have the Nootka proper, the Nitana, and the Makah. Okay, so as we already know, the Nookan people introduced the whaling culture to the entire coast. It also had an impact on transportation, obviously. The Nookan canoe was highly sought as the reliable transport for the entire coast, and ultimately was exported for sale throughout the entire coast as a preferred local craft. So here at a small scale we can see the normal canoe that would be used to tow a whale. And the whale would come off of this rope right here, and it would be split for weight compensation between these two tow lines. The heavy reliance on water life for many reasons. Not only was it the only possibility for survival in this North California climate, but it also provided food, transportation, and the threshold for outlasting white man's western expansion for as long as possible due to the difficulty to access. Especially with the European realization that Nookan brown fur pelts were worth more than their original weight in gold. White men often contracted skilled Nookan hunters for whaling and fur expeditions, which became very lucrative for both groups. Yet the increased traffic left the Nookan region susceptible to danger. So these are two of the most common traps that the Nookan fishermen used. This one's a pretty basic gravity trap. The trap right here would be connected to the shoreline, and it would be very easy for the anadromous fish that were going upstream to be caught. This next one's a little more complicated. It has a lot to do with the water line. When the fish enter the basket over here, as they continue to go in the current is going with them, this barrel gets really full, and the weight pulls it down so that the fish can't get back out, because the opening would be up here and it wouldn't be underwater anymore.
So this is just a background video of a Modern Family's smokehouse for fish. Basically for preparation of food. Women typically prepared food, yet men typically prepared for larger ceremonies or feasts. The meals could typically be up to 14 courses, Nookan specific. It always are separated from touching other foods, just like a little kid would be. Nookan tribes also never served food piping hot. In quotes, they would say white man style. They allowed it to cool, as they believed many sicknesses and the loss of spirit power were the results of doing just that. Food preservation was also limited. They didn't have any salt for a long time. Smoked food, normally fish, could be eaten like jerky. yet typically food was a way to gather together and celebrate a day, so fresh food was usually typical. Image of a longhouse. I don't believe it's Nootka specific, but currently there's a potlatch going on inside. You can see the smoke rising from the middle where they're probably cooking, and you can see the hole in the top of the longhouse. Obviously shelter was of such importance due to the climate of the northwest coast. The positioning of the longhouses were placed within peninsula inlets where it was available to avoid harsh winds. Also, it caused a lot of fish to come in between, so it was good for hunting. And on the sides, a short steep bank faced the water in order for canoes to be made and quickly put out into the water, so they didn't have to carry them very far. So this is a cool video of a spring Nootka deadfall trap. Basically, the logs are at a small scale. Usually they would use much larger trees if they were trying to kill the animal, but he's just showing this at a small scale so that he can work with it much easier. It's basically going to have a tripwire that he's pointing at right now. You can see a small piece of bark covering that, and the food would probably be underneath that, the bait. And this would be placed on a trail with a lot of traffic, so that any small rodent or anything that they would be able to catch would be injured.
So the deer walks in, and there we have it. So hopefully he needs dead weight that's going to be big enough to crush the animal. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of shots with the bow I'm working on. This is a ancient Nootka Indian design, the one on the left here. It currently draws 83 pounds at 28 inches. It's a pyramid bow. I'm going to shoot the first arrow. It's about an 800 grain carbon arrow. It has weight tube, a 200 grain point. Immediately following that, I'm going to shoot about a 300 grain carbon arrow with a 200 grain point. So that arrow is going to weigh probably 450 to 500 probably when all is said and done.
So this is the area we're working with for the Nootka tribe. This is the region, the Nootka Sound. It's important to look at for three reasons, basically. For the exclusivity that I've already talked about, the white men, the expansion, they obviously were all the way to the west, so they were one of the later tribes to experience the white men. Also, because it's so far north and northwest, the climate also plays a huge role in their day-to-day lives, based on their housing, based on their food, based on their clothing. And finally, it's also important, you can obviously tell that water life has a lot to do with it based on transportation and obviously food. So this is actually a picture of me at Boston Kayaking Central. It was a river kayaking tour that you could take. I actually had a Groupon for it, so I figured it'd be a good experience to relate to this project. The Nootka people, the modern Nootka people, kayak a lot of time, I guess to relate to their ancestors. They're big on kayaking, especially the region that they live in. It is actually a lot harder. It is a lot harder to kayak than I thought it would be. I flipped it over 3 times, and especially with the current and the the tides, it's definitely not as easy as I thought it would be.